Hi and welcome to episode 31 of Roxy's Journal of Stitchery. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up my background just a little bit further. I'm going to add a few decorative elements so that you'll see the layout of my block. And I'm going to start stitching my butterflies so you get an idea of what they're going to look like. So here in the video so far, what I'm doing is I'm playing around with the composition of my bits and pieces and including where I'm going to attach my little quote. So I'd actually already stitched the little green piece of fabric down, and there's some tulle, some vintage tulle, it's really old, underneath, and I did film it, but when I played the video back I realized it was completely out of focus. So sorry, you're not going to see me do that. But it's literally just a simple running stitch on that piece of green fabric. And in fact, I'm going to put another piece of fabric on top of it and I'll do the same running stitch so you'll see what that's like. So I have this little cross stitch flower from an old doily or embroidered doily, which I think is really pretty. So I'm just stitching that down using a running stitch and just a normal sewing cotton, just a thin piece of sewing cotton, so you can't see the stitches too well. And now what I want to do is I want to stitch my quote down as well, but before I do that, like I said, I'm going to add another little piece of fabric. I'm just layering it up a little bit just to give a little bit more texture to my piece, because I realize my background is fairly simple this month. So just laying that down, and then I'm going to do a simple running stitch like I did on the other piece of green fabric that's underneath, using a white sewing cotton. So as you can see, I'm now stitching down my green piece of fabric, just using a basic running stitch. I think I do one line in one direction, then I turn around and go back in the other direction. So there are loose frayed bits on the edge, but I want to have that look because it gives it texture. So my little pieces of green fabric are now in place, and now I'm going to sew around the quote. This time I'm using, it's kind of like a minty aqua colour, Perle cotton number 8. It's actually a vintage cotton. Everything I'm using for this month's block is basically old or reclaimed. The only thing that's probably not old were the stamps that I used to print my quote and the stamp pad, like the ink. That's new items that I bought, but everything else I've either been given or I've got at a crafty op shop, or I've bought deliberately old, mostly from the crafty op shop that I've showed you that I go to, the sewing basket, which I did a video on. So again, a running stitch, this time in green. I want it to stand out, and I want a bit of green because it's supposed to be a quote about a garden, so you need some green in a garden. Now this little label, I think I mentioned before in another video, came off a linen embroidery piece where the pattern is printed on the embroidery and then you go ahead and embroider the doily, and they had this little label on it which I thought was cute because it's related to sewing and it's got some green which matches nicely with my garden. And I like the fact that on this block it's different this week or this month, and I've actually got some text, so not just the stamped quote but also in this label. So the stitch that I'm doing again is just with that very fine, just normal sewing cotton, and I'm doing an overcast stitch around the edge to hold it in place. So now my background is pretty much put together and my composition is in place. I want to use some vintage pieces of quilt to make my butterflies. So I've got a few old pieces of quilt and I've got a seam ripper, you know, a seam to take up the stitches. Is that what it's called? Seam ripper, having a mental blank. And I'm just separating these old pieces of quilt so that I can use the pieces of fabric. I love these fabrics. They're actually super faded, which you'll see when I get the edges out. And I want to use bits and pieces of these old quilt blocks or scraps of old quilt to make my butterflies. So just while you're watching me take apart my pieces of old quilt, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who's commenting on my videos. That's everyone that's sharing amazing things on Facebook and on Instagram. I just have to apologize though because I'm super behind in my replies, especially on YouTube. I think I'm about 3 weeks behind, and it's just because I'm really busy at work and I do work long hours. And then at night, I'm often doing work as well, catching up with marking and things like that. And I'm just not finding the time to be able to do that. But I am reading everything and I will endeavour to catch up. And I am looking at everything on Facebook, but I just don't have the time at the moment to be commenting on everything. But I wanted to tell you that I do really appreciate your kind comments. And I'm going to do my best to catch up, especially on YouTube, and answer any questions that people have. So just saying I will try and catch up, although we have a super busy weekend this weekend as well. My son is playing in a big pipes and drums competition. So for anyone that doesn't know about pipes and drums, it's basically a Scottish band. The school that he goes to is a Scottish school in Sydney, and he plays the big bass drum. So that will be good for him. And then my nephew is actually sailing in a massive kind of like an Australian Championship sailing thing that's been going on all this week and into the weekend, and we'll be going to watch him on Sunday as well. Plus, we'll fit in my son playing some water polo on Saturday. So we're pretty busy this weekend. Mum's coming down this weekend, which is good news because she'll bring down her sewing and I'll be able to film it rather than just taking some photos. So you'll get a Juju update in our next video, which is exciting for everyone to see. So I hope you look forward to that. Anyway, getting back to my block, what I'm now doing is I'm going to do very rustic needle turn applique. If you are a quilter and you do needle turn applique, this is going to be a very messy version of it. I am just eyeballing how I want my little butterfly body parts to look like, and I'm going to needle turn applique them, which means I cut out the shape and then I slightly fold under the edges. It's just a very small amount folded under, and then I do a little overcast or whip stitch around the edge to hold the shape. Now, I have not measured out nor drawn the shapes for these body parts. I am just freehand cutting them out, so they are so far from perfect, not even close, and a little bit wonky, and I just bend under the fabric as I move along. And it's called needle turn applique because you can use the point of the needle to help you tuck that little piece of fabric under, and then I'm stitching down the little butterfly bodies. So for each of my butterflies, and there will end up being 3 on this page, there will be 2 body parts, the long tail and then the larger part at the top. And then I'm going to show you one of my butterflies today, what my plan is for the wings, which will be the same for the other 2 as well, but I'll get that done for next week. And then I will be doing embellishing, like adding, you know, eyes and doing some embroidery and stuff like that. So here's my first little butterfly's body, stitched down into place, and now I'm going to make the larger part almost like the head. So I'm just deciding which old piece of fabric I want to use. As you can see with these fabrics, there's darker edges, so you can see how faded this quilt is. I would have loved this quilt. What beautiful fabrics were in this quilt. And I just love old bits like this. I don't know, are they feed sack fabrics? They look like feed sack fabrics to me. which I absolutely adore, feed sacked fabrics, and I have a few bits and pieces, but they can be hard to find over here in Australia. So my next little piece is the little round head, and again just needle turn applique, just tucking under the edge. It's literally 2 to 3 millimeters tucked under, very small amount because it is a small piece of fabric, and just doing a little whip stitch around the outside. All right, so there's my first little butterfly's body done. And now I'm just going to pick some more fabrics, and I'm going to do 2 more little butterflies. So I'm going to squish a little small one down the bottom here, and then I'll do another one in that larger space as well. Right, so just stitching down the head of my second butterfly, just some old green fabric again from an old quilt, using the needle turner applique method. You could probably do a raw edge applique method where you don't tuck the edges under and you would just stitch around the edge of this shape, and that would look good as well. You'd get a little bit of fraying, which might be a look that you like, but this one I'm just trying to use a different technique. So these little butterflies, I've actually done something really similar before. If anyone has seen my videos from participating in the collaboration where we did a block slow stitched for, I think we had, what did we have, 7 people in our group, and we did one a month and we sent them to other people around the world. It was hosted by Susanna Eastdale, who I know is following along with our project and doing amazing things. And one of the ladies, Melanie, really liked bright colours, and she wanted bright pink and bright green, and I did a little scene for her with these butterflies. So same kind of idea. I just wanted to try them again, but these ones are much smaller than the ones I did for her. So now I'm coming up to the wing part, and as I mentioned before, I want to make the wings out of old pieces of lace. So I've got this piece of lace here which I thought was perfect because those little shapes look like butterfly wings to me. So I'm cutting them down and I'm going to separate them, and I'm going to actually attach these wings to my small little butterfly down the bottom. So I'm just trimming off my last piece. So I've actually got 4 little parts for wings, and you'll see that I lay them down on my butterfly to see how they look. So planning on having those 2 and then the little ones at the bottom. But I decide it actually looks a bit more like a four-leaf clover. So with its four wings, four leaves. So I decide just to go with this single leaf. It's kind of like a double wing anyway because it's a bit like a love heart shape. So stitching these down, this time using my thin silk thread in the very pale grey, which you can't notice as I go around the edge. So I'm just doing a straight stitch around the edge of the heart shape, which will hold the wing in place. All right, so there's my first little butterfly with its wings. Now, as I said, I will be doing some extra embellishing, and it doesn't really have a face yet or antennas, so there will be some things to come. And then my other two big butterflies will also get their wings as well, which I'll show you next week. So just to give you a slightly closer view, here are my little needle turn applique butterfly bodies and the little wings. I've got some lovely Steph Francis threads. I bought some more because I really love them on the side, and I'm thinking I might use some of those colours. And here is my quote with the few other little bits and pieces. So there will be a lot more embellishing of this block, but I like what, so I hope you like, not I like, I hope you like what I've done so far, and I will see you again next week. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.